It's kind of surprising that it's already Thursday. I can't believe this week is sort of flying by, and we've got a lot like collected, a lot of sort of news and notes and items that we need to talk about and we have to go over. We really gotten a chance to, because on Monday we talk about all the transfers they landed over the weekend. Tuesday we had to preview that Duke game. Wednesday we had to recap the Duke game. And so that brings us to Thursday. We got our mailbag tomorrow, which means if I'm going to get to some of these news items, of which there's a handful that have been sort of building up over the last few days, I got to do it now, or else we're going to miss out on that opportunity, wait until next week, and we don't want to do that. So a bunch of news. Pitt got a transfer, another big transfer. They got it Tuesday. One of their former players picked his school. He's going to be staying in the ACC. There's a contract extension for Pitt's most successful current coach. A new non-conference game was added, and there's another important offensive lineman coming to town this weekend. Another transfer actually coming to town today. So let's talk about all that. Transfers in, transfers out, transfers that are already gone, coaching extensions, non-conference game schedule. There's all kinds of things to talk about. Let's not waste any time. We'll jump into it right here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Thursday. It's the Morning Pit. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Glad you could tune in as we always do. We ask you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pit video content. These daily Morning Pit videos, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night, like we did last night at 8:30 p.m. with me and Jim Hammett. And post-game shows, we'll start getting some basketball post-game shows going here coming up in the near future. We'll keep you posted on all of that. But if you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's right down there is the subscribe button, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can turn on your notifications, and you'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live. So you don't miss anytime we do anything here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of it. So like and subscribe. That'd be cool. It'd also be cool if you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, to get all the Pitt sports coverage you can possibly handle. There's football, basketball, recruiting, transfers, all those things. You can find it right there, I should say, at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, let's start off with the transfer edition. Probably the biggest news of the week. No, I mean, technically Dan Fischer's contract extension is probably the biggest news of the week, but as it relates to football, the biggest news of the week is Pitt landed another transfer. They got they got 7 guys on Saturday. They had 3 going into the weekend, got 7 on Saturday. We talked about all those guys on Monday, those 10 transfers. And they got transfer number 11, I guess it was Tuesday. I get my days mixed up on when these things happen. But it's Jaden Moore, a defensive end from Oregon. He just finished his redshirt freshman season at Oregon, went into the transfer portal. So he's got 3 seasons left to play. Redshirt sophomore, redshirt junior, redshirt senior season. And he committed to Pitt, signed with Pitt earlier this week to be the 11th transfer to join the Panthers. And quite frankly, he might be, I don't know what the right adjective to use is, whether it's most important, most impactful, highest ceiling, whatever you want to call it. Jaden Moore, I think, is right near the top of the list of the transfers that Pitt has brought in terms of what I think they can do, the potential that exists, and kind of what they should be able to do for the Panthers this year. I mean, they brought in, I think, a number of guys who are going to be in prominent roles, probably starting roles. I think some of the offensive linemen we've seen them bring in will be in a starting role. I think Kendall Stanley, the offensive tackle from Charlotte, is probably going to be in a starting role. Likely at right tackle will be my guess, but we'll see. Keith Gouveia, I'm still not going to get that right. Should be in the mix at left guard. Coming from Richmond, he should be in the competition there to get that starting job. But so there are impact players in this group. There's starters probably in this group. Maybe one of the wide receivers even. But I think Jaden Moore has a chance to make as much of an impact, if not more, than any of them. Moore, I keep saying more. It's getting confusing because I'm saying more and more in terms of his last name and more in terms of what I think he can produce. 2 years at Oregon for Jaden Moore. Didn't really play as a freshman, or he played 4 games and kept his red shirt. But last year he got on the field a little bit more, and some of the numbers that we've talked about a lot, and I suspect you've probably heard a lot or read a lot in reading about Jaden Moore is that he had 73 pass rush snaps in 13 games for Oregon. Now, that's not a lot. That's playing in a reserve role. That's less than, obviously, in terms of Pitt, less than Nate Matlack, Jimmy Scott, Chief Borders, Sincere Edwards. It's fewer snaps than any of those guys took. All four of those top defensive ends at Pitt, Pitt's top four defensive ends all played more than 70 snaps. And so Jaden Moore on the low end in terms of pass rush snaps. However, this is according to Pro Football Focus, he did record 16 pressures. 16 pressures on 73 snaps is one every less than 5 snaps. He's getting a pressure. He's getting to the quarterback, pressuring the quarterback, forcing the quarterback out of rhythm, and putting pressure on the quarterback. And I think that's huge because if you just look at pressures per pass rush, Moore's numbers blow everyone else's out of the water. Never mind just Pitt guys like Nate Matlack and Jimmy Scott and Sincere Edwards and Chief Borders. I mean, Moore played a lot fewer snaps than Chief Borders and had quite a bit more pressures than Chief Borders. Moore played, I think, 130 some snaps fewer than Sincere Edwards and had 2 fewer pressures. So obviously he beat those guys, but you look at some of the best defensive ends and best pass rushers in the Big Ten, and those numbers for Moore compare favorably. Like some of the best. Now, it's a small sample size. You're projecting out from a small sample size, but to get 16 pressures on 73 pass rushes, if you put him on if he could maintain that pace with the kind of workload that some of the other guys in the Big Ten had, guys who had 300 pass rush snaps or 400 pass rush snaps, he ends up with 80 or 90 pressures in a season, which is a ridiculous number. He probably wouldn't get that many, but even to get into the high 60s or 70s would be huge. I think Jimmy Scott and Nate Matlack had 37 and 36. Respectively. The pace that Jaden Moore was on puts him into the 50s, 60s, 70s, that range, which would put him among the tops in the Big Ten this past season. So the potential's there. And again, even if he just mirrors his production from this past season, he gets 16 pressures, he'll have outperformed Chief Borders and came close to the performance and production of Sincere Edwards. So if that's the baseline, and maybe it's not because 16 and 73 is pretty ridiculous, but if that's even close to the baseline, you're already at least equaling what you lost and probably surpassing it. I think Jaden Moore has a lot of upside. I think he's exciting. He's a good pass rusher. He gets off the edge quick and gets into the backfield, as evidenced by the production. And, he looks like, I don't know if I would say the best addition so far. I keep struggling to find that adjective, right? Whether we're talking about most important, most impactful, whatever it means. I think Jaden Moore is going to be a top 4 defensive end for Pitt this season, potentially a starter because they do have that starting job open opposite Jimmy Scott. And I think he's going to be out there, and I think he's going to be playing a lot and should make a positive impact. We've talked a lot about how this defense needs ends, how they had a pretty desperate need for defensive ends even when Sincere Edwards was still on the team. And once Edwards left, when he went into the transfer portal, it became even more desperate. That's why we've seen them sign 3 defensive ends out of the portal so far. Before Moore, they got Blaine Spires from Utah State and Joey Zielinski from Eastern Michigan. I don't know if either one of those guys looked quite as exciting as Moore does. They definitely didn't have his pressure per snap, pressure per pass rush, production. And I think just between the youth, the explosiveness, and what he did in limited opportunities at Oregon, it looks like the most upside out of any of these defensive ends, and probably one of the highest ceilings and some of the most upside out of the entire transfer class that Pitt has brought in. And the other thing too is there's the long term to think about. And it's hard to think about the long term in college football these days, where you don't really assume anyone to be on the team a year from now. But whereas Blaine Spires and Joey Zielinski are done after this year, Moore is potentially an investment in the future. Not just for 2025, although he's going to absolutely be needed in 2025, but he's an investment for the future of, potentially giving you production for the next 2 or 3 seasons. As opposed to Spires and Zielinski, who are 1-year guys. So there's a lot to like there. Like I say, I think it's, maybe the best addition they've made. And obviously at a position of need where they need to improve the pass rush and improve at defensive end. They got a guy who looks like he should be able to bring that. I think they've got another potential starter coming in to visit today. CJ James is an offensive lineman from UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio. He's coming to Pitt today for a visit. He also visited Arizona and South Carolina. He's an offensive lineman, particularly he's a center. That's where he's played throughout his career. He started 47 games over the last 4 years. He was at Abilene Christian for a year or two. I think maybe 1 year. He was at New Mexico for a year, and then UTSA for the last couple. 47 starts in those 4 seasons, gave up a total of 55 pressures allowed, but 18 of those were in 2022. This past year, he started 13 games at UTSA and gave up 12 pressures, which is I mean, that's very, very good. You would like to have no pressures coming up the middle. You'd like to think your center can hang on for that. But even so, giving up 12 pressures in 13 games, I mean, you'll take that. You'll take the level of experience that he's got, and you'll take the level of play that he has brought. And CJ James seems like he's got a chance if he commits to Pitt, potentially either today during his visit or shortly thereafter, because these guys are all getting on, the timeline for all of these transfers is getting shorter and shorter. If he were to commit to Pitt today or this weekend, James would probably be one of the best transfers they've brought in, right up there with Jaden Moore. I think he's got a chance to be maybe the best offensive lineman they've brought in. Like I say, Arizona and South Carolina are the other top competitors for him. He's visited both of those schools. He had a lot of SEC and Big Ten schools reaching out to him. He turned them down in order to stay focused on Arizona and South Carolina and Pitt. And Pitt being closest to home, he's a native of Massachusetts. I think Pitt being closest to home helps as well. So you got a chance to get a really experienced center who's getting a lot of positive interest in the portal, who could come in and potentially step into the starting lineup. Now you say, well, that's one of the positions, center. It's one of the positions where they're returning a starter in Lyndon Cooper. But the fact that they're pursuing James like this leads me to believe either they're looking to replace Cooper or they think Cooper could slide out and play one of those guard spots. Or, and probably the most likely scenario, they're looking at potentially having this guy, CJ James, plus Lyndon Cooper, plus Joey Gouveia, plus BJ Williams, plus some of the young interior linemen, and they're going to basically put them in the Yahtzee cup, shake them up, pour them out, and see who cracks out as the top 3 interior linemen. With Cooper and James both being centers, Caleb Holmes being a potential center, you've got enough options that you can pick your 3 best guys and roll with them. Another Yahtzee pun there. You can pick your 3 best guys and roll with them heading into the season. So, I think we've all believed they need to get a lot of offensive linemen in the portal this offseason. So far, they've gotten 2, a tackle and a guard. This would be 3, a center, and it might be enough to satisfy the Pitt coaches and feel like they've done enough in the portal with the O-line. I'm not sure I would entirely agree with that, but if we get to a point of finality where they actually have decided to stop taking offensive linemen, and if it really is just 3, then we'll criticize them when we get to that point. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But looks like a real good chance for Pitt here if they can get this guy. We'll see what happens today and over the next few days as he visits and then after his visit. And again, it's a short time frame now. Like these guys, you're into the semester. I think the semester started for Pitt either yesterday or Tuesday. I forget, the spring semester. And you don't have to be in for the first day. There's a little bit of a window, some grace period there before you really need to get in. And athletics can kind of get some wiggle room and, we got to get this guy in late or something like that. But there comes a certain point where you got to be in class. You can't wait until February or March and try and enroll when the semester's over in a month or two. You need to get into class, say it with a straight face. Academics are still important. But there are rules and things that you largely do have to follow, and getting in probably before the ad drop deadline, which I think is the 21st, that's a necessity. But I don't think most of these guys, they don't want to take 2 more weeks to find their destination. So I think a guy like James, some of the other transfers that are still out there, will look to find a new home sooner rather than later. Speaking of transfers that are still out there, Jordan Bass came off the board. The former Pitt linebacker announced earlier this week or over the weekend or at some point that he's going to go to Virginia Tech. I think Bass almost went to Virginia Tech to begin with. I think they made a big late push for him in his recruitment, tried to get him off his Pitt commitment. He ended up sticking with Pitt. Now that he went into the transfer portal, that's where he ended up. A lot of schools were after Jordan Bass, understandably so. I think he's going to be really good. Virginia Tech is ultimately the one that wins. Bass going closer to home. I mean, Blacksburg isn't really close to anything, but it's closer to home than Pittsburgh. It's closer to home than USC or Oklahoma or any of these other schools that were after Jordan Bass. And so he gets a little bit closer to home. He stays in the ACC. And who knows? Maybe we'll have a new defensive system to play in 2026 if they fire Brent Price. So, hey, good opportunities lurk around every corner. But Jordan Bass is off the board. He's staying in the ACC. Handful of guys still out there for Pitt out of the 17, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Yeah, 17 players who have left Pitt for the portal. There's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 who have not picked a new school yet. Rodney Hammond, and again, unless I missed it, and I apologize if I missed some of these guys. I don't think I did, but in case I did, Rodney Hammond still needs a new home. Elliot Donald, Lamar Seymour, Jeremiah Anglin, Dejon Reynolds, David Ojebwe, Tamarian Crumpley, and Chief Borders are all still looking for homes after going into the transfer portal. Of course, a handful of guys already have found their place. Nakai Johnson's going to Tulsa. Terrence Moore is going to Toledo. Noah Bigelow is going to Louisiana Tech. Montrevious Lloyd is going to Bethune-Cookman. Nate Yarnell will be playing at Texas State. Ty Diefenbach is going to Cal Poly. And Sincere Edwards is going to UCF. Oh, and the other one that was somewhat recent is Rylan Gandy is going into Indiana. So he announced that one, again, earlier this week or over the weekend, somewhere around there. So those guys are off the board. Still a bunch that are still out there looking for homes, but Jordan Bass is not one of them. Another guy who's not going to be looking for a home anytime soon because he's already got it is Dan Fischer. Pitt volleyball coach, Pitt announced yesterday that Dan Fischer signed a contract extension through 2030, keeping the most successful coach at Pitt. Fischer, of course, I mean, his success, like, I don't even know, like, where do you even start? Like, what do you say about Dan Fischer? How do you pick a point to start with Dan Fischer? Oh, he was the coach of the year this year. Oh, they've made the Final Four 4 years in a row. Oh, they went 33-2 this year. Oh, they first 4 NCAA tournament matches this year they swept. It's just, the list is a mile long. It's a CVS receipt of accolades and accomplishments and success that Dan Fischer has enjoyed. And this is an important move for Alan Green, Pitt's athletic director. Still new. He's still in his first year. And one of your first real acts, I think official public acts, aside from establishing the athletic director's fund or whatever they're calling it, is extending Dan Fischer. And that's a pretty good way to go. I would say it's important as a priority to keep that program strong, and it's important to show everyone that program is a priority for you. As a lot of people talk about football and basketball just taking over and other sports getting cut and falling by the wayside and all this stuff, I mean, like, it's good to show, hey, this is our most successful program right now, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep that, keep it going. And so I think that's a good move for Alan Green, an important move for Alan Green, and a good statement from him and the Pitt Athletic Department to extend Dan Fischer. Of course, congratulations to Dan Fischer for all the success that led to this extension, and then for the extension itself, it'll keep Fischer in Pittsburgh through 2030. And then the other thing that was announced this week, Pitt will open the 2025 season against Duquesne. That game will be on August 30th at Acrisure Stadium, as you might suspect. It's not a home and home. It's just the FCS game for 2025. Locks in 3 of Pitt's 4 non-conference games to a date for next year. August 30th, Duquesne at Acrisure Stadium. The next week, Central Michigan will come to Acrisure. And then in week 3, September 13th, Pitt will go to Morgantown to face West Virginia. Still waiting on a date for the Notre Dame game. I'm not really sure when that'll be. It won't be, so you have those first 3 weeks, August 30th, September 6th, September 13th. It won't be the 20th or 27th. I think Notre Dame plays those weekends, or October 4th. I think they have an open date on October 11th, Notre Dame does. But then they play like USC or somebody on the 18th. And I think by the time they get to October 11th, I think Notre Dame will have played 6 weeks in a row. And so my guess is they'll want to keep that October 11th date open, particularly before they play USC. So I think, and I mean, I could be wrong, could go a different way. I think, if you're looking at dates for Pitt Notre Dame at Acrisure Stadium this season, it's probably that last weekend in October, the 25th, or in November. I think those are your probably like 5 options for when that game will be played. So you're not going to have Notre Dame as an early season non-conference opponent. They're going to be sprinkled in there in the middle of the ACC schedule, which is how it's been for the last, I don't even know, however many times I can remember. Pitt has played Notre Dame in the middle of the ACC schedule, and it'll be the same thing for this year. Of course, the rest of Pitt's schedule, home games in the ACC, Boston College, Louisville, NC State, Miami. Road games in the conference, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Stanford. Who's going to Palo Alto? Who's going to Georgia? Who's going to Tallahassee? Who's going to Syracuse? I haven't been on the road in a while. Maybe I'll go to Georgia Tech. I like the Atlanta trip all the time. I always enjoy it. I think it's fun. I like going there. It'd be fun to go to Palo Alto. I was in Palo Alto almost 30 years ago. I went out there in high school and hung out at Stanford for a while. It's a long story, but it's not that long, but I don't feel like talking about it. But it was beautiful. It was everything it was cracked up to be, everything you think and hear and believe about Stanford and Palo Alto and the campus. It's all amazing. I would love to go back out there, but that's really freaking expensive. So unless I get a job for Pitt, I'm probably not going to be going to Stanford. And I'm probably not going to be getting a job for Pitt anytime soon, particularly if they don't take any more offensive linemen out of the transfer portal. I'll probably say a lot of things that would preclude me from getting a job at Pitt because they need more offensive linemen in the transfer portal. Anyway, that's how the schedule's coming together. I forget when. I think it was late January that they announced the full ACC schedule last year. So maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll get a full look at Pitt's 2025 slate. See where, because I think when they announce that the full ACC schedule, they'll probably include Notre Dame as well. So you get the full 12 game schedule announced at that point, and then we'll go from there. See what it looks like. But that's all the news and notes, everything we wanted to catch up on from the past few days. We got the mailbag tomorrow. There's still time. If you want to submit a question, go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board, post a question in the mail time thread, and we will answer as many as we can on the mailbag tomorrow. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And of course, check out the website Panther-Lair.com to get all of your Pitt sports coverage. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you have a great Thursday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.